All right, Metal Maniacs, welcome back to the shop. Today we're forging a beautiful Damascus knife out of something that spent its life inside a transmission, a CVT belt. Hit that subscribe button and let's fire it up. Before we introduce this thing to the fiery hell of the forge, we have to make sure it's structurally sound. We're using a MIG welder to tack weld the individual belt segments together. You need strong tacks here. The force of the power hammer later is immense. The curved ends are a problem for the initial weld, so we're cutting them off square using an angle grinder. Now that the bulk of the coil is straight, we'll mark a straight section and reinforce the tacks. The smoother the initial faces, the easier the forge weld will take. Cutting away any excess welding bead is key to prevent air pockets during the main welding phase. Now we cut the long coil into 8 roughly equal-sized sections. This forms the core stack of our first Damascus billet. A quick tack weld to fuse all 8 pieces together. Then we weld a temporary rebar handle. Always weld your handles securely, especially on stacked billets. Into the coal forge. We let it soak and then add the secret sauce, borax welding flux. We heat the steel until it reaches welding temperature, around 1200 degrees Celsius, 2200 degrees Now. The steel should be a bright, almost sparkling orange yellow. The borax cleans the surface oxide layer and protects the clean steel underneath from oxygen. Out of the fire, onto the anvil. Time for the power hammer to compress this stack. We use quick, heavy blows while it's at welding temperature to force the individual segments to fuse into one solid billet. We continue heating, fluxing, and compressing until the billet is fully welded and consolidated into a square bar. We've got a solid bar, but we need more layers for the true Damascus pattern. We use a chisel and hammer to cut the billet into 3 equal sections. The bar is still hot from the forge. Restack them, flux them, and back to the fire. This is how we multiply our layers. We've gone from 8 effective layers to 24 layers in a single folding cycle. We heat it back up to welding temperature and repeat the power hammer compression to fuse the new stack. Back to the power hammer. Compress the stack, then turn the bar 90 degrees and start drawing it out, lengthening it into a long, flat bar while maintaining a consistent width. This forces the metal to flow, mixing the high and low carbon layers. The bar's finally cool enough to handle, but it's covered in forge scale, so I'm hitting it with an angle grinder to clean up the sides. Just a quick rough grind to reveal the layers and check how well those welds held together before we take it any further. Tip: grind carefully. You want to remove the crusty scale without losing too much valuable material. Look at that cross-section. Layers on layers. It's ready for the final step of pattern manipulation. To achieve a random Damascus pattern, we cut the bar into 4 pieces and weld them together into a square stack. Now we weld a heavy steel handle, twisting bar to one end and a turning block to the other. Back into the fire. We're heating the bar to a lower, more controllable temperature, around 1000 degrees Celsius, 1830 degrees, hot enough to twist, but not so hot that the welds tear apart. We put the bar in the vise and use the handle to start twisting it slowly and evenly, one full rotation at a time. This twisting action wraps the layers around the bar's center line, setting up the complex random pattern we'll reveal later. The twisted billet comes out glowing hot, and we move it straight under the power hammer. Each strike compresses it back into a square shape while stretching it longer and thinner. This process not only refines the steel, but also tightens and elongates all those twisted layers inside, the part where the magic happens. Finally, we draw the twisted and forged bar into the long, flat dimensions needed for the blade blank. This is the final shape before grinding. The layers are now flowing down the length of the bar. The hard part's over now for the cleanup. We use the belt grinder to grind the entire bar flat. This is the first time we truly expose the pattern of the forged metal. We remove the hard, dark forged scale to reveal the contrasting layers. Now that the billet's drawn out and cooled, it's time to bring the knife to life. I grab a marker and sketch the rough blade profile right onto the steel bar, outlining where the edge, the tang, and the shoulders will be. This is where the vision starts to take shape. Then comes the fun part: more sparks. Using an angle grinder with a thin cutting disc, I carefully carve out the outline, slicing through the steel to form the rough shape of the blade and its unique features. It's loud, messy, and satisfying. Every pass gets us one step closer to turning this chunk of metal into a real knife. Now we clean up the profile and start establishing the rough bevel on the blade. The flat disc grinder is good for gentle shaping of the curved sections, while the belt grinder is best for flat bevels. We're aiming for an even bevel before the all-important heat treatment. More grinding! This is the final cleanup before heat treatment, so it's all about precision now. I switch to a sanding pad on the angle grinder and smooth out both flat faces of the blade until they're clean and shiny. No scale, no dirt, just bare, polished steel. A clean surface is crucial before hardening because any residue can mess with the heat treatment. Plus, when we later dip it in acid, that flawless surface will make the Damascus pattern explode with contrast. This is the calm before the storm, the last breath before we light it up again. Hardening time. We're bringing the blade up to non-magnetic critical temperature, about 815 device bars to 870 and 1500 to 1600, checking that sweet non-magnetic spot. Then, a quick quench into the engine oil. The oil provides a slower quench rate than water, which is necessary for complex alloys like these. We clean off the quenching oil with sawdust and wire brushes. The blade is now hard but brittle. Now we temper it. A proper temper requires placing the blade in an oven at around 200 degrees C to 250, 400 degrees F to 480 degrees for 2 one-hour cycles to reduce the brittleness and achieve a working hardness. Finally, we use a softer buffing wheel to clean the surface after tempering. If you're loving this transformation from raw steel to a real blade, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more fire and steel coming your way. The moment we've been waiting for, the acid etch. We dip the blade into ferric chloride. The acid reacts differently with the high carbon, darker etching, and low carbon, lighter etching layers of the Damascus steel, revealing that deep, contrasting pattern created by the twisted CVT segments. A quick scrub in water to neutralize the acid, and another light sand to increase the contrast. This whole etch and clean cycle can be repeated several times until the pattern really pops. For a handle that matches the wild, rugged soul of the blade, we're going with deer antler and brass. Raw nature meets refined metal. First, I rough cut the antler on the bandsaw to get the right length and shape, keeping its natural texture intact. Then, I grab a solid brass plate to craft the guard. It's going to add both balance and a touch of elegance to all that raw power. We start by marking the exact outline of the tang onto the brass guard. Precision here is everything. Then, using the drill press, I make a series of small holes along that outline to start carving out the slot. Once that's done, I switch to a fine file and slowly shape the opening until the tang slides in perfectly snug. It's a slow, almost meditative process. One wrong move and you can ruin the fit. When it's just right, I take the brass to the belt sander for a quick polish, smoothing the surface and giving it that warm, golden shine. Even at this rough stage, you can already see how clean and elegant the final piece will look once everything comes together. Next up, the handle assembly. We take the deer antler and carefully drill out its core using a large bit, going slow to avoid cracking the natural material. Once the hole is deep and even, we clean out all the dust and debris so the epoxy can bond properly. Then it's time to mix the magic glue, a dark two-part epoxy that not only holds everything together, but also fills any tiny gaps inside the antler core, giving the whole structure extra strength and a clean, seamless look. I coat the tang, the inside of the antler, and the brass guard with the epoxy, making sure every surface is covered. Then comes the satisfying part, sliding the whole thing together like puzzle pieces, blade, guard, antler perfectly aligned. Once it's in place, we clamp it down tight to cure. This is where patience pays off. A solid bond here means this knife will last for decades, maybe generations. The black epoxy seeps just enough to create a sleek, rugged contrast against the brass and bone, already hinting at how badass the final piece will look. Once the epoxy has fully cured and everything's locked tight, it's time to make this handle bulletproof. I grab a small drill bit and carefully drill through the brass guard and deep into the antler, adding a solid metal pin that runs straight through both pieces. ChatGPT Plus, once the polishing's done, I wipe everything clean and take a step back. And damn, this thing looks incredible. The brass gleams like gold, the antler has that organic, wild texture, and together they give the knife this perfect balance between raw nature and craftsmanship. You can still see faint marks of the process, little reminders that this blade was born from fire, steel, and patience. Now, it's ready for the final edge. I take it to the sharpening stone, working through finer and finer grits until the edge can shave hair with a single pass. Every stroke makes it deadlier and more beautiful. What started as a greasy old CVT belt is now a handcrafted piece of art, a blade with a story forged into every layer. And yes, she slices like a razor. It cuts the water bottle like air and the aluminum can like butter. This isn't just a pretty showpiece. It's a working blade. From a greasy old CVT belt, we've forged this absolute beast of a hunting knife. The pattern's pure chaos, true random Damascus. If you loved seeing scrap turned into art, smash that subscribe button and tell me, what car part should I forge next? Stay sharp.